Tuples are another type of sequences in Python. You can consider tuples as being immutable lists, meaning their contents cannot be changed by adding, removing, or replacing elements. Tuples may prove to be useful when you want to store some data in the form of a sequence and keep that data untouchable. However, unlike sets, tuples are ordered collection of non-unique elements, meaning indexes and duplicates are allowed. Okay, enough with the theory, let's start to practice and create our first tuple. Tuples are enclosed by parentheses and their elements are separated by commas. So let's create our first empty tuple. Let's say my tuple. Okay, let's check type of my tuple. And indeed, this is an empty tuple and Python confirms this as well. If you want to create a tuple with a single element, you have to use a trick, meaning that although you have only one element inside the tuple, you have to write a comma after it, otherwise it will not be regarded as a tuple. Let's see this in practice. Let's say my tuple having a single element, let's say 9. And now let's check type of my tuple. And this time we get class int, meaning this is an integer. As I said, in order to define a tuple with a single element, you have to add a comma after that element. And this time, if we check type of my tuple, you have a tuple set up. You should remember this when creating tuples that have a single element. Next, let's populate our tuple with more elements. So let's see my tuple. Okay, just like strings and lists, tuples support indexing. So if you want to access an element within a tuple, the indexing rules we've seen before are still applicable. So my tuple of 0 returns the first element in the tuple, which is 1. My tuple of 1 returns 2, of course. My tuple of -1 returns the last element in the tuple, which should be 5. My tuple of -2 should return 4, and indeed it does. Since tuples are immutable, you cannot add or modify an element of a tuple. Let's check this. Let's say we want to modify the element at index 1, so my tuple of 1 equals 10. And we get a type error, tuple object does not support item assignment. Also, removing element is not permitted when working with tuples. So, del of my tuple of 1, we get the same type of exception, type error. This time, tuple object doesn't support item deletion. Another interesting thing you can do with tuples is tuple assignment. This means you assign a tuple of variables to a tuple of values and map each variable in the first tuple to the corresponding value in the second tuple. Let's see this as well. We will define tuple 1 having the following elements. And now let's assign a tuple of variables to tuple 1. So let's say vendor, comma, model, comma, iOS equals tuple 1. Finally, let's check if the assignment and variable to value mapping have been properly performed. This means vendor should have the value of Cisco, so let's check this, vendor. And let's check the other two variables as well. And the assignment has been properly done. This is also called tuple packing and unpacking, and you can see it as a kind of mapping between elements of two different tuples. An important thing to remember here is that both tuples should have the same number of elements. Otherwise, if you have different number of elements, a value error will be returned. So let's check this. Let's say we have tuple 2 equals 1, 2, 3, and 4. And a tuple of variables, let's say x, y, and z equals tuple 2. So you can notice that tuple 2 has 4 elements, 4 values. And this tuple of variables has only 3 values. And this should return an error, as I said. Indeed, we have a value error, too many values to unpack, expected 3. You can also assign values in a tuple to variables in another tuple within a single statement, which is even more convenient. So let's try A, B, and C equals 10, 20, and 30. Now let's check A, B, and C. Okay, so the result is correct. The mapping has been done successfully.